The Angine de Poitrine Hypothesis, predictive coding and neurodivergence, functional sensory modulation. This is a hypothesis, not a peer-reviewed paper, not a banned biography, not a claim of insider knowledge. It's the product of 176 days spent studying the mechanics of my own brain under repair, and when I encountered this band, something clicked. Angine de Poitrine don't want you to dance. They want to crash your operating system. The first thing you notice is the masks. Oversized, papier-mâché, expressionless. Then the suits. Polka dot, anonymous, faintly ridiculous. Then, if you're paying attention, the absence. The two figures on stage have stripped themselves of individual ego so completely that they cease to be people at all. They are components now. Functional units in a system that is about to do something very strange to your brain. And then the music starts and strangeness gives way to something closer to a hijacking. What Angine de Poitrine produce is not by any conventional measure easy listening. The notes fall between the notes, microtonal intervals that live in the cracks of a standard piano keyboard. The time signatures shift without warning, yanking the downbeat out from under you. The synchronization between instruments is so precise it feels surgical. The overall effect is of something deeply chaotic being executed with total mechanical control. Chaos, it turns out, is the point. Precision is the delivery system. And your brain, specifically its lazy habit of predicting everything 3 seconds in advance, is the target. The Autopilot Problem. The human brain runs on predictive coding. It is constantly comparing incoming sensory data against stored templates. And when the data fits the template, it conserves energy by running on autopilot. This is, in most circumstances, a feature rather than a bug. It's why you can drive home from work with no memory of the journey. It's why pop music works. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Your brain maps the architecture early and disengages, tapping its foot on standby. For a significant portion of the population, those with ADHD, autism, anxiety disorders, or simply a mind that won't stop chewing on itself, this autopilot capacity is not a convenience but a prison. The background noise never stops. Rumination loops. Future catastrophizing. The relentless churn of a brain that cannot find the off switch. Standard popular music, with its 4/4 time and equal temperament tuning and verse-chorus predictability, does not help. It is too easily mapped, too quickly filed. The brain hears the pattern, nods in recognition, and returns to its ruminations. The music becomes wallpaper. Angine de Poitrine have worked this out. Their solution is not to soothe the brain, but to overwhelm it. The mechanism, forced present moment processing. Microtonal music introduces intervals that fall between the conventional 12 notes of Western tuning. For a brain raised on equal temperament, these intervals are foreign territory. There is no pre-existing template. The predictive coding system, so efficient at pattern matching standard chord progressions, hits a wall. It cannot autocomplete because it has never encountered the raw material before. The result is forced present moment processing. The brain, stripped of its shortcuts, must process each interval in real time. It has no choice. And when Angine de Poitrine layer shifting time signatures on top, breaking expected downbeats, disrupting rhythmic anticipation, the cognitive load becomes total. This is not relaxation, this is controlled cognitive overload. The background noise, the anxiety, the planning, the rumination cannot compete for processing power because there is no processing power left. The music is consuming it entirely. It is, to borrow the clinical language, a circuit breaker. Angina Pectoris. The choice of name is either the darkest joke in experimental music or no joke at all. Angine de Poitrine is medical French for angina pectoris, the crushing chest pain caused when the heart muscle is starved of oxygen. It is a signal of distress from the body's central engine. To name a band after this condition and then to build that band around the concept of cognitive reset suggests a level of intentionality that borders on the philosophical. They are not merely a music act, they are an intervention. Safety and surrender. Here is the paradox at the heart of the experience. The music sounds chaotic, but it is executed with total precision. The microtonal intervals are intentional. The rhythmic shifts are rehearsed. The syncopation is exact to the millisecond. This creates a specific and unusual form of safety. The unpredictability is, in fact, entirely predictable. The brain can surrender to the chaos because it knows on some level from the evidence of flawless execution that the chaos is controlled. There is a system here, there are hands on the wheel. And then there are the masks. The removal of faces is not an aesthetic choice, or not merely one. It is a functional deletion of social decoding load. No facial expressions to read, no eye contact to navigate, no banter that demands on-the-spot calibration of response. The performers have stripped themselves of individual ego and become, in effect, instruments in human form. For anyone who finds social interaction exhausting, and this describes a large portion of the neurodivergent population, the masks are not a gimmick, they are a relief. The broader implications. If the hypothesis holds that microtonal music forces present-moment processing through sustained pattern violation, then Angine de Poitrine are not merely making interesting sounds, they are demonstrating a principle of functional sensory modulation. The mechanism is consistent across modalities. Certain meditation practices anchor attention to breath. Complex motor tasks demand full cognitive bandwidth. Specific visual stimuli overwhelm the brain's predictive capacity. In every case, the strategy is the same. Overload the autopilot and force the executive system online. This sits alongside those interventions not as entertainment, but as a non-pharmaceutical tool for cognitive reset. Not a cure, the language here must be precise, but a circuit breaker, a way to interrupt the loop. For the neurodivergent population in particular, those whose internal noise is persistent, debilitating, and resistant to standard interventions, the implications are worth taking seriously. The open questions. The hypothesis is compelling, but it is still a hypothesis. Several questions remain unanswered, and they are not trivial ones. Does the effect habituate over repeated exposure? The brain is an astonishingly adaptive organ. If it eventually builds templates for microtonal intervals, if the unfamiliar becomes familiar, then the circuit-breaking effect may have a shelf life. The band that works once may not work forever. Is the response universal, or does it vary by neurodivergent profile? An autistic brain and an ADHD brain are not the same brain. The mechanisms of cognitive overload may produce different outcomes depending on the underlying wiring. Can the effect be measured? Biometric markers, heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, EEG patterns, would move this from the subjective to the empirical. So far the evidence is anecdotal. Powerful anecdote, but anecdote nonetheless. And perhaps most critically, does the effect persist after the music stops, or is it strictly state-dependent? A circuit breaker is only as useful as the period of calm it enables. If the noise rushes back in the moment the final note fades, the intervention is palliative, not therapeutic. These are research questions, not rhetorical ones. They demand investigation. Refinement. The Angine de Poitrine dose-response curve. The original hypothesis states that injecting hyper-complex pattern-rich sensory data, like microtonal music, acts as a manual reset button by demanding 100% of an overloaded brain's processing power, effectively silencing background negative loops. But what if your brain is already functioning perfectly well? I attempted to interface with the same complex input to test this theory, and I discovered a vital biological nuance. The strategy has an explicit dose-response curve. When overloaded, high-complexity input is intensely therapeutic. It absorbs the excess cognitive noise and forces a system-wide reset. When balanced, high-complexity input shifts from therapeutic to agitating. Because the background noise is already quiet, forcing the processor to execute complex decoding patterns unnecessarily crowds the working memory, creating friction rather than peace. This is a massive strategic refinement. It proves that cognitive engineering tools are not static habits to be performed blindly every day. They are precise situational inputs that must be deployed based entirely on your real-time internal metrics. The invitation. Angine de Poitrine are not asking you to like them. They are not asking you to dance. They are issuing an invitation of a different order. To sit in a room while a precise and controlled chaos consumes your cognitive bandwidth so completely that for the duration of the performance your brain cannot do anything but listen. For some people, perhaps more than we currently know, this will not feel like entertainment. It will feel like the first silence they have experienced in years. Angine de Poitrine are an anonymous musical duo. The recordings and performance schedule can be found through channels they decline to specify. The masks, one presumes, will be waiting.